Hello, welcome to Chapter 15, Part 2. We're going to be talking about Congressional Reconstruction of America, the impeachment of Andrew Johnson, our next president, which would be Ulysses Grant, and the rebuilding of the South. When I made this slideshow, I hadn't really imagined that people would storm the Capitol as they did on Wednesday of this week. But as we look to fix a broken America during the Civil War, just after the Civil War, we have to think of all the things that we've accomplished so far during this time. In just a short 100 years that this place has been a country, mankind has accomplished so much uh, that it would take thousands of years previous to add up what we did. If you think about it, we now have a written constitution, we've have established government, we've explored literally from sea to shining sea. We have inventions that have totally changed and totally modernized society. We have also stains on America, which include the Trail of Tears. We've included additional states to buy into this idea conception of a union. We have fought the Mexican American War, excuse me. We have fought the British, we've fought the French, we have fought the Native Americans, we have fought the Spanish. We've fought everybody. Of course, the British too. We had the California Gold Rush. We've had immigration. We've had our country divided and put back into two pieces. Of course, we had a civil war amongst each other. We've had assassination of a U.S. president, and we now have slavery abolished. And if you think about it, in retrospect, that's a lot that got accomplished within a 100-year span of American history. Again, as compared to thousands and thousands of years that the previous empires of the world have accomplished. You think back to some of the greatest empires of the world, whether it be the Roman Empire, the Greek Empire, the Persian Empire. It would have taken probably thousands of years to accomplish the things that we accomplished in 100 years. So we have a lot to be thankful for, but we also have a lot of work to do, not only during this period, but even today in the year 2021. And I just love resharing this meme because uh, it just fits so well with the Reconstruction period as well as modern today, the year 2021. So there's a division between political parties. There's a division between the southern region, northern region. There's a division of ideologies. How do we put our country back together? What's the best way possible? And so to kind of summarize a little bit of political history, there's something called radical Republicans, moderate Republicans, conservative Republicans. If you're a radical Republican, you have a kind of a wild way of thinking, and there's nothing wrong with that. It just means that you are thinking way outside the box and introducing something that might just take others aback, such as the idea, the notion of abolishing slavery. That would be a radical idea in thinking. That's a whole new way of running things in America. The moderate would be kind of the middle of the road. You can kind of see how radicals think, but you can also see how conservatives think. If you think of radical being one side of the coin, conservative being one other side of the coin, and if you're moderate, it's almost as if the coin has not quite flipped either way. It's kind of on its edge on the table. If you're a conservative, you kind of like the good old days. And I guess in this term, we like to go back the way things used to be. Conservative way of thinking, especially during this time, is we don't want to go there. That would not be a good idea. Moderates would kind of keep the status quo, kind of again see both sides of the issue, kind of doesn't like to rock the boat either way. The radical idea would unite political parties, whether it's Republican parties or Democrat parties. Um, proposing new radical ideas can be a positive thing. However, it can also uh, bring about changes that we may not have wanted as well. Okay, in 1867, of course, the uh, black American males in the United States can now vote for the first time. And the Republicans see this opportunity as a way to garnish more votes for them. Remember, in the South, it's predominantly Democrats. And now that you've opened up a whole new wave of people to vote, a couple, 2 or 3 million black voters in America, well, as a political party, you, of course, won those votes. And so you try to appeal to that particular segment of the population. And if the South has more people, it means they're going to have more representative Congress, and they're also going to have more strength in the Electoral College for future elections. So Republicans seize the opportunity to kind of take care and woo the African Americans here in the country because they know that they're going to be an important vote in coming years. Some of the radical ideas that come from the Republicans include women's suffrage, rights for union laborers, or labor unions, excuse me, and civil rights for Northern African Americans. The Civil Rights Act of 1866 includes the 14th Amendment, which declares that all persons born or naturalized in the United States were citizens. It obligates the states to respect the rights of U.S. citizens and provide them with equal protection of the laws and give them due process. This eliminates past acts that could be repealed by future presidents. An act is nice on paper, but in practical applications in the United States doesn't fare so well. Having an amendment makes it a much stronger clause. It makes it much more difficult to get rid of. You can abolish an act very easily as a president of the United States. You can come in and say, all these acts are just useless. Let's just get rid of them. But a president can't come in and say, I don't like that amendment. Let's get rid of it. It's super hard to repeal. You have to have lots and lots of support. And this now applies to all the states and all the federal lands of the United States, not just certain segments of the population. So again, the 14th Amendment declares that all persons born or naturalized in the United States are now citizens. You notice that it does not mention anything about females. Other additions to the 14th Amendment include disqualified former Confederate political leaders from holding their either states or federal office. It repudiated the debts of the Confederacy, basically made the Confederate money worthless. The bonds are worthless. The promissory notes are worthless. The bonds are worthless again because I have two of them. But anything that had Confederate, anything that was attached to money is now useless. And when we say repudiate the debts, it is not just we just rip them up, turn them in the trash can, and we'll just forget about them. The North, the Union, will eventually take on that debt, and it'll just become part of the federal debt forever. It also penalized a state if it kept any eligible person from voting by reducing that state's proportional representation in Congress and the Electoral College. So if a state comes in and says, oh, well, we're going to not allow black voters between the age of 21 and 26 to not be able to vote. Well, first of all, that's illegal. And if they did that, they would reduce the representation in Congress and reduce the representation in the Electoral College. The election of 1866. Johnson is unable to work with Congress. He goes on tirade trips to spout his own thoughts. Does that sound like anyone you might know? Any U.S. president in modern history you might know? Any president who might use Twitter that you might know? Johnson was warning America of an Africanized society. And by that, he was not a very big supporter of the abolishment of slavery because he had strong ties to the South, and the South heavily depended on slavery to run plantations. And if your support and your funding comes from the South, you're going to rub shoulders with those who control the purse strings. Doesn't sound very American of him. Doesn't sound very patriotic. He's accused of being a traitor to his country. Waving the bloody shirt reminded from Republicans to the Northerners about the war we just endured. So if you see the picture of the guy on the slide there, you'll see he's waving a bloody shirt, and that's simply just reminding the Northerners that, hey, we endured a lot. We just finished a war that was the worst war on American history on soil. Um, do we really want to just throw everything out the window, and all those men who sacrificed their lives and women who sacrificed their lives, do we just want to throw it out the window and call it no good and start all over again? We can't. We've came so far. We have to continue the fight. Democrats now are branded as a party of rebellion and treason. So you might hear even today the people from the South as being rebellious or unruly. That's kind of where that comes from. The Reconstruction Act of 1867. Congress will override Johnson's veto, something that does not happen very often, by the way, in that it placed the South under military occupation. If you see on the map there, it places the South into 5 military districts. In order to be readmitted, these Confederate states must ratify the 14th Amendment and place a guarantee in its Constitution for granting the right to vote for all males regardless of race. Again, it does not say anything about females, it just says all males. The South is being held hostage. Did they really have a choice in the matter? No. About the only thing they might have been able to do is they could perhaps form their own country again, but that would just be going backwards, and they know that they did that once, it didn't work. Texas is very close to redeclaring itself as its own republic, but again, didn't work very well. They almost have to depend on the North for economic stability, and they know that nobody in the world is going to recognize the sovereignty of the South, so they are held hostage. They don't have a choice. There's something called Veto of the Tenure of Office Act. This prohibits the president from removing a federal official or military commander without approval of the Senate. Johnson didn't like this. Johnson is president, of course, of the United States at the time, and he's left with the Republican cabinet that was formed under Lincoln. Remember, Johnson inherited this administration, so he's inherited a bunch of Republican cabinet members. And that doesn't sit well with Johnson because Johnson has his way with his party ideologies, and then you're left with the cabinet members who have their Republican ideologies. So Johnson did not like this Tenure of Office Act. So he will challenge it. But the question is, why did Congress override Johnson's veto of this? Well, it's pretty simple. It's just politics. Again, Johnson was not a Republican, but his cabinet was. It was an important thing to keep government moving forward. This time period we're talking between Reconstruction and the middle of the 1890s is kind of the Republican domination of the United States. They would win 5 of 7 presidential elections. They are branded as the Party of Reconstruction. They maintained a policy of keeping the economic boat floating with supporting a strong central bank, the railroad industry, tariffs or taxes, and aid to homesteaders. So again, supporting a strong central bank, which 50 years ago under Jackson would have not flown. Heavily supports the road industry because without the railroads, you don't have goods and services moving across the United States. Tariffs because taxes are an integral part of keeping infrastructure alive. If people don't pay taxes, then we can't keep things operating in government. We can't have military. We can't have railroads moving. We can't have things operating the way they should. Freed slaves would flock to this party due to their stance on slavery before the war. It would give them a new sense of strength. Remember, we have 2 or 3 million slaves that are now free, and they're being offered something. They're going to move to the political party that offers them the best route of freedom. You think of it today. If you, excuse me, if you had to choose between a political party, and I guess I shouldn't say you, but some people might choose a political party based on what they can get from them. And by that, I mean, this can be a wild example, but if one party says, we are not going to offer free college education, another party says, yes, free college education for students is very important because we need to have prepare students for 21st century jobs. It's very important that we have smart people in America, yada, yada, yada. Well, people might tend to flock towards that party because they're getting something out of it. And so Republicans and Democrats both recognize this, but I think it was Republicans who kind of capitalized on this idea and gained the sense and the vote, uh, gained the support of the Black Americans. As the party grew, well-rooted Republicans were unwilling to criticize corruption of then President Ulysses S. Grant and other Republicans. Republicans have grown so large, so fast, that they tend to forget where they come from, and they tend to out their own people. You'll see that even in today's modern politics, people who are staunch supporters of a particular president might kind of forget where they come from, forget who they're working for, we the people, and give everything they have towards that president and be very, very loyal. And that's kind of what happened back then too as well, is they were so loyal that they kind of forgotten their roots and who they are. Eventually tired of this, many would flee the party. They're called mugwumps, and they would help the Democrats win the 1890s. So after a period of 20 some years of being the Reconstruction giants of the world, they get tired of this corruption, greed, and they move over to the Democrat Party. A couple more terms you'll want to know about. Scalawag is a white Southerner who collaborates with a Northern Republican during Reconstruction, usually for the benefit of personal profit. The term was often used by white Southern Democrats who opposed Reconstruction legislation. Carpetbagger is a person from the North who went to the South after the Civil War to profit from or seek power from the Reconstruction era. So wherever there is a chance to make a buck, people are going to seize that opportunity. Again, we see that even today. When a crisis happens in America or throughout the world, people profit from it. So I guess a modern day approach to this might be the earthquakes and whatnot that have happened in Haiti over the past decade. United States has been very generous in opening up their pocketbooks and donating to the cause. However, people from overseas or even here in America might see the opportunity to scam people out of their money and portray themselves as an organization that is there to help the people of Haiti. And so people donate to that cause, not realizing that it wasn't a legit organization and they've been scammed. The impeachment of Andrew Johnson, a giant falls. He done screwed up too many times. Johnson thought that the Office of Tenure Act was unconstitutional and challenged it. Even though he vetoed it, Congress overrode the veto, and Johnson called their bluff and he tried to remove the Secretary of War Stanton. Well, the courts have found that unconstitutional. The House responds with charging Johnson with 11 high crimes of treason and misdemeanor. Again, remember, Johnson's going out on the campaign trail and making all kinds of wild accusations. He's trashing people left and right. He's kind of doing what he wants to do. Again, does that sound like a modern day president that you might have known? After it's all said and done, he is one vote short of being required to be removed from office. This is the closest that it ever came to removing a United States president from office. Again, the other two presidents who were impeached were Bill Clinton of the 90s and our current president, Donald Trump. Both of those two were impeached, but they were not removed from office. Johnson will be the closest one to being removed from office up to this time in history. The election of 1868. Johnson's political career is over. And I put in parentheses, is Trump's question mark. Especially after the scene that we saw yesterday in the news regarding the I call it the storming of the Capitol. I wonder if Trump's career is possibly over. Maybe he will run for re-election in the year 2024 because he seems to have a number of followers. The Democrats nominate somebody called Horatio Seymour. Republicans name some guy named Ulysses Grant. I've heard of him once or twice, but maybe you have or haven't. I don't know. This whole impeachment process that Johnson goes through really trashes his whole entire party. And of course, we know that Ulysses Grant will win the election. But bring it back to a modern day perspective. All the things that our current president has said or done that may have not been quite positive. You have a lot of people who were once loyal to Trump very much distance themselves away. I'm talking politicians, not people, but politicians in the sense that they don't want to associate themselves with Trump anymore just for fear that their political career might be tanked as well from this. And again, another example is from yesterday's storming of the Capitol. In many Republicans took to Twitter, took to Facebook, took to the news to denounce themselves that they are distancing themselves from Donald Trump and that this is not the typical behavior of the Republican Party or even Democrat Party for that matter. And I think Republicans are kind of doing damage control in the fact that they don't want to be seen as that party that causes chaos, corruption, or causes chaos, rather. So in previous events in history, when Clinton was impeached in the 90s, it results in the Republicans winning the presidency with George Bush Sr. And that was towards the end of Bill Clinton's 8 years of office. So it's not like he could run again, but another president, Democrat president, could have been in place. But there was a stain on that political party, results in the Republicans winning. Trump's impeachment, again, results in Democrats winning. I don't know if you would call it a coincidence or what you would call that, but it's just kind of how things happen in history. Not sure if it's directly related that an impeachment always results in people voting the other way, or what it could be. The turnout of black voters was a signal to Republicans that further protections need to be put in place in order for the Republicans to keep control of the White House in the future. Again, the Republicans know that the black votes are out there. They need the black votes, and so they need to put even more protections out there for those people to be able to cast their vote. Same thing will happen for women voters and immigrants later on in history. Republican parties will seize the opportunity and see that, wow, women can now vote. How many more million votes does that make available out in the country, as well as immigrants too? But the idea that you now have a new voter base to capitalize from, and so you try to produce those protections to make sure that they can continue to want to vote for that particular party. So with the new segment of black voters in America, it keeps Republicans in control. The 15th Amendment prohibits any states from denying or abridging a citizen's right to vote on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Again, this does not provide women the chance to vote. It takes it a step further to protect the voting rights of citizens. And now I'll show you the differences here. The Civil Rights Act of 1875 was a law that guaranteed equal protection and equal accommodations in public places, including hotels, railroads, and theaters. It also prohibited the courts from excluding African Americans from juries. However, again, it is simply an act. It doesn't have much power. It's a law, but it's not a law. But boy, if we could take that and tweak it into an amendment, that would have a lot of clout for Americans. So to kind of recap those amendments, the 13th, again, abolishes slavery. 14th Amendment declares that all persons born or naturalized in the United States were citizens, U.S. citizens, and obligates the states to respect the rights of those citizens and provides them equal protections of the law and give them due process of the law. The 15th prohibits any states from denying a citizen's right to vote on account of race, color, or previous servitude. Again, nothing is ever mentioned about women. And even when we wrote the Constitution, all men are created equal. Nothing about women. Your assignment you will find in Google Classroom today at 10 o'clock. And it is due by Friday, 11:45 p.m. This concludes Chapter 15, Part 2.